Today's Cloudcast is sponsored by our friends at The Cyberwire. If you have trouble keeping up with the latest cybersecurity news, we recommend The Cyberwire's daily podcast. Each day, they give you an informative 20-minute recap of the latest and most important updates in the industry. They keep their content concise, accessible, and relevant, separating the signal from the noise in an industry overloaded with information and competing messages. We here at the Cloudcast, we listen to stay up to date every day, and we think you should too. So subscribe to the Cyberwire today. You can visit thecyberwire.com/subscribe or search for The Cyberwire, CYBERWIRE, in your favorite podcast app.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from the Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have both of us for Cloud News this week. How you doing, Brian?
I'm good. I'm back from KubeCon, so I was promised great weather in San Diego, and as KubeCon has now become, anywhere KubeCon goes, they get the worst of weather. So we got the only rain they've had in San Diego in 4 months. But other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue. So KubeCon continues to grow. What was it? Probably about 8,000 last year in Austin?
About 8,000 in Austin last year, about a little more than 12,000 this year. So, Kubernetes still has a buzz and seems to be generating a lot more people have interest in it. So yeah, it was an interesting show. It's a weird show because it's not a vendor show. So you don't walk away from it going, oh, there were 6 new announcements. It's more like, how much has the community grown? How much does the community still get along? And generally it's still, a lot of kumbaya. So it was good. It was a lot of energy in the show.
That's good. That's good. And the other thing I'm finding, because I haven't been and wasn't this year, but what was interesting to me is, so I'm going to AWS reInvent, which will be next week. And, you and I both went for a number of years, and, reInvent was like, for a while there, VMworld was the place to go. Then reInvent was the place to go. KubeCon feels like the place to be, because I was like, oh, or, is so-and-so going to be around? Or everyone's like, no, we're at KubeCon. We're not going to go to that. So I feel like there is, granted, there's still like 100,000+ people going to AWS, but there is a certain contingent that is definitely more KubeCon centric and less reInvent centric. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely different audiences, and KubeCon is still at a size where you can get to sessions, and you can, reInvent's an awesome show. The logistics are, as we've mentioned, sort of a nightmare. Like I'm going to be watching a lot of it from video, but different audiences, definitely more of an open source crowd, and but yeah, it's good for the CNCF to continue to keep growing, and good to see so many people are attending the thing. So it's always good when technology's growing.
Yeah, agreed. And since we did mention AWS, let's kind of move on to that for our next story here. So in addition to the show getting bigger and bigger every year, the announcements are getting more and more every year. And we're to the point where, it's almost like Black Friday sales here in the States for Thanksgiving before Black Friday.
Yeah.
We're starting to do AWS announcements, before the event, and a lot of them.
Yeah. So as a teaser, next week's show will basically be a review of AWS, of reInvent. So last year we took all the announcements, at least as many as we could find, kind of organized them for you. So we organized them kind of by functional areas. We'll do that again this year. We'll kind of do some reviews of what we think are probably the most important ones. We'll make you a big list. It'll be easy to go find them. The crazy thing is, like we mentioned, there are so many of them, and again, a lot of these are just like incremental things. So don't freak out. Like they don't have 900 new services, but like 2 weeks ago they were announcing new storage capabilities, and this week they had like 65 press release announcements. So if nothing else, Jeff Barr is gainfully employed. His entire team of bloggers is gainfully employed, and we will have lots and lots of coverage of AWS reInvent in next week's show.
Yeah, and I just want to tack on there. So just like you mentioned, it was like 65 press releases in 1 week, and that's not even the main set of announcements. Right. Most companies are happy to get 1, maybe 2 out.
Oh yeah. Next week is the absolutely best week if you're in tech to release bad news, or if you got bad earnings, drop them next week. If you're selling your company, drop it next week, because nobody will pay attention to it. So you will be out there, and hopefully we'll get some good insight from you on it as well.
Absolutely. So moving on to the next one, Google Cloud, Thomas Kurian is on a buying spree here. And latest acquisition was Cloud Simple. The easiest way I had to think about it was fully integrated VMware migration tool. And I kind of had a little bit of color around this one. I jokingly have heard in the community and this week and kind of, in some of the back channels, it was like, well, they had to buy them before somebody else did, because whoever was going to buy them first, has the ability to maybe shut off the migration to all the other paths, because, it was kind of this equal opportunity migration path to AWS, to Azure, and to GCP. And so this assures them a very well-known and pretty popular tool in the industry that it kind of locks it up.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because everybody has already bought a migration tool. So, I mean, AWS had bought another one. I think we covered this 5 or 6 months ago. They bought another one that was a migration tool. Microsoft bought one a couple of months ago. This is the second one that VMware has bought. They had bought Velostrata. So, if there's any doubt in anybody's mind that the cloud providers would like you to run in their cloud as opposed to, maybe prioritizing some of their new on-prem services, kind of follow the money, as they say. They would very much like you to run in their cloud, and they're going to try and provide a lot of tools, at least VM-centric tools to help you migrate VMs. And it's not only a big business for them, but man, it's a big business for all the SIs. Most of the SIs have entire businesses of just doing VM cloud migration. Probably something to worry about if you are VMware or VMware admin, because the cloud providers are coming not only for your applications, but your jobs to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last one we had on the list, and we'll wrap up Cloud News of the Week. And this one is kind of in my space, kind of my job space as well. I know, there is a section of the Clouderati and the Twitterati and the analyst community and all who all just said, well, IBM's going to buy Red Hat. They will blue wash them. You will never hear again from Red Hat, and they'll be like every other acquisition. Very interesting. This last week, IBM announced a whole bunch of new functionality on top of OpenShift. So just sort of the opposite is happening. Not a lot of blue washing, a lot of sort of Red Hat sort of driving some of where IBM's strategy is going. So backup capabilities being added around OpenShift. Hybrid cloud security capabilities being added, key management being added around Kubernetes. So it's interesting to watch IBM very much get aligned to the Red Hat strategy of hybrid cloud and Kubernetes and OpenShift. And I thought it was sort of interesting, especially given kind of all the feedback that I heard personally when the acquisition went down, and kind of all the pundits telling us what IBM was going to do. So kind of 180 degrees from where people thought things were going, and we'll get those links in the show notes for all of the things of this week's Cloud News of the Week.
Fantastic. And that'll kind of wrap it up for this week.
Yeah, we have a very interesting interview for those of you that are interested in getting your developers more engaged, developer programs, how to get your developers on board your platform. You're definitely going to want to listen to this interview. So let's get to it. Today's episode is sponsored by Datadog, the cloud scale monitoring service that provides comprehensive visibility into public cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environments with over 250 integrations. Datadog unifies your metrics, logs, and distributed request traces into one platform, so you can investigate and troubleshoot issues across every layer of your stack. Use Datadog's rich, customizable dashboards and algorithmic alerts to monitor cloud migrations in real time. To start a free trial today, and Datadog sending you a free t-shirt, visit datadoghq.com/cloudcast to get started. That's datadoghq.com/cloudcast. And we're back. Aaron, one of the things, I was out at the KubeCon show last week, and I had an interesting comment from a friend of ours who has been in the infrastructure space for a long time. He's been covering the industry for a long time, the infrastructure space. And he said, this was really kind of the inflection point for him, where he said, this thing it's not about infrastructure anymore. It's all about developers. I don't know if you're necessarily seeing that. I know you've been at reInvent, or going to be at reInvent. You were at Ignite. Are you seeing that as well?
Oh, completely. It is really interesting to see how this industry has kind of not quite flipped on its head. That might be in over rotation a little bit, but without a doubt is changing the way we're approaching all of this. And you and I historically, we've said it before, we tend to come from a bit of an operations background, but it's definitely been a shift in culture and a shift in approach, and it's really fascinating to follow and be a part of.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we have been, like you said, we've been learning it probably more and more over the last 4 or 5 years. And so I thought, something I hear all the time from companies that are trying to build software better. They're going through digital transformation. They're doing DevOps, whatever they're calling their evolution. A lot of times they're like, how do we better engage our developers? How do we get them to use the platforms that we're using? How do we get them to work better together? And so I thought, well, what better way to do that than to talk to some people that have been building successful developer programs for a while? And so very excited to have Mark Weitzel, who is the VP and General Manager from New Relic of the New Relic One platform. So Mark, welcome aboard.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So before we kind of get started and talk about New Relic One and the things you're doing at New Relic, let's talk a little about you and your background. You first and foremost, we always love to have people who are from the Raleigh-Durham area. You're local, so that's always good. But give us a little bit of your background, sort of what you were doing prior to New Relic and sort of what got you excited about being in the developer space, helping developers be successful.
So I love it, and definitely happy to represent the Raleigh-Durham area and the Bull City. It is nice to have some local folks, so definitely there. Interestingly enough, what brought me to Raleigh-Durham from South Florida was IBM. And I spent a number of years working in Research Triangle Park at IBM, where I've really had a long history of building platforms and building ecosystems around that, going back to when I led a couple of open source projects at IBM, which then led to joining this small startup in Palo Alto, although I was able to stay local, where we built an entire application platform around the social business space. This was Jive Software, really thinking about how do we expose the power of the platform to developers to build innovative applications on top of that. And then did the same kind of thing at Sugar CRM, where really grew this ecosystem of partners and developers building CRM type applications on the platform. And that's led to this journey at New Relic, where we are building the world's first observability platform, meaning you can write software on it, you can develop on it, and you can write a new kind of application, this observability application that lets you go beyond dashboards, if you will.
Nice. So Mark, before we dig into the New Relic Developer Platform or program specifically, wanted to get your perspective on exactly what it means to be a developer these days. As we kind of, Brian and I talked about briefly in the intro, in your mind, is it AppDev? Is it DevOps? Is it data scientist? Is it business analyst? There's lots and lots of personas, if you will, around being a developer. So tell us a little bit about what your thoughts on that before we dig deeper.
Yeah, it seems like it's all of those and more, and it's so hard to sort of isolate down into a specific thing. And I really believe that a developer is somebody who's bringing value through software and the things that they're doing. We know right now that the world's becoming more and more digital, and we've seen the IDC report that says 50% of the global GDP is gonna come through software and come through digital. And with cloud, this is becoming more and more accessible, and so we're seeing people from different backgrounds come into becoming developer, and their developer population growing more and more. And what we're trying to do at New Relic is we're trying to meet people where they are. We're trying to provide them with the tools that they need to provide that value, whether it's tools that help them do workflow automation because they're trying to automate their build and CI/CD pipelines and bring New Relic and that observability in there, whether it's writing applications on the platform that provide unique business value to their businesses. All of those are very valid personas that we look at as our developer population is growing and as the number of developers continue to grow.
Yeah. We're gonna dive into the platform. We keep sort of getting into that. We're kind of setting this up, and the reason we're dragging our feet a little bit on this is I want to make sure we have a number of listeners who come from sort of maybe not development backgrounds in terms of they run central ops, they run central IT, they're part of enterprise architecture. And one of the things I find in talking to a lot of companies, I get a chance to get out and talk to them at different stages of their journeys, their transformations, is a lot of times those groups will say, we've been building this platform, we've been building CI pipelines, we're trying to be responsive to these things that we hear that developers want, and then somewhere along that journey, 6 months in, 12 months in, whatever it is, they go, we can't figure out why developers aren't coming to us. Why aren't they using these tools we provide? Why aren't they doing the self-service thing? And I'm curious, you're running a program that has to go cater to lots of different types of developers, lots of different types of applications. Anything that you found from building your program that could be valuable to those people as they're trying to understand, we built it, they haven't come. What's slowing it down? What's the problem?
Yeah, there's a number of sort of factors inside of this. I sort of have three kind of fundamental beliefs that sort of drive and guide creation of a platform. Creation of my developer program. And the first is that, I like to think that all developers are created equal, whether you're working for New Relic and building the New Relic application and platform, or whether you're coding on that. We want, as much as possible, our APIs to be the same, the tools we use to be the same, the command line interface that we use to build on top of that. We want all of that to be the same. This notion of all of those things being equal, your developers having this notion of being able to kind of contribute and use the same tools you do. So this notion of equality is very important. The other thing is really looking at trying to be open first, working with open protocols, working in open source, being transparent about the things in the direction you're going, and allowing for input and feedback along the way, kind of that feedback loop. So this notion of being open is very, very important. And then creating this really joyful experience when you build something, right? Nothing is better than that, aha moment when you do something and you see it and it works. And I think as you weave in those values into your program, you have to recognize that people build on your platform for a specific reason. In the partner world, it's really easy, right? They're going and building an integration to your platform or building on your platform to get into your customer base, to integrate their platform. If you're looking at developers who are working for a company, you have to recognize that they're trying to distill as much value from your platform as possible. And you want to build the tools and the interfaces that make it easy for them to unlock that value very quickly.
So Mark, that's really good points. And so let's, with that, segue into New Relic One specifically. Tell us, first of all, about it for those that aren't familiar with it, and then tell us a little bit about what makes it beneficial and different in our industry.
Oh, sure. So New Relic One is the industry's first observability platform, and we think there's a number of characteristics of this. You have to be open, and we like to think of it as open, connected, and programmable, because in our head, you're not really a platform if you can't write software on it. So when we think about being open, this is really being able to collect the data from anywhere. We've been collecting and instrumenting things for a long time, since our history as a company. And now you're starting to see us being able to collect things from open standards and open protocols. And being able to collect the data from anywhere and being open is extremely important. The next piece of that is this notion of being connected. And so when we think about being connected, it's making sense of all of the data that comes in and understanding the relationships between the entities or the things that you're observing in your production environments, like really having a deep understanding of that. So, what applications are running on which hosts, or all your software that's running in your clusters. And then this notion of being able to be programmable, right? Having a first-class programming model on top of your platform. And so as we think about that, that's what makes New Relic One very different, New Relic very different from anything else that's out there. We can write real first-class applications on top of the platform that have full access to your telemetry data and can bring in a lot of your business data on top of it. And it's unlocking some incredibly powerful applications that we're starting to see already.
Yeah. What do you, observability is sort of, new buzzword, although it's not just monitoring, it's not just metrics. It is really kind of a different way of not only collecting data, but having, kind of real-time feedback loops, being able to, view things in a different way. Who are you finding is sort of best suited for those tools? Is observability something that's kind of platform centric? That the ops team and an SRE team should become experts in this? Is this something that becomes part of a toolbox for developers? Is it sort of a mix of the two of them? Who do you find tends to gravitate towards this new capability that comes out of observability?
I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix of both of those personas that we talked about. If I think about, for example, one of the things that developers can do is have this notion of custom instrumentation that you provide in your code, right? We have custom attributes, custom events in the code itself. And what that allows developers to do is start to think about what are the important things to my business. So we think, traditionally in the monitoring space, it's, is my software up and running? Are my services available? Is anything on fire? If we take that a step further and we think about providing more business value from your data that sits inside of New Relic, right? From all this telemetry data, because everything that's flowing through your business from a digital standpoint flows through New Relic. And as you start to think about that, you can now start to do some interesting things. So for example, one of our customers who's built this application, availability to them is my service up or down? Am I able, in this case, to stream video to my customers? It's because of regulatory requirements and a customer having a subscription and being able to access the video stream that they subscribe to anywhere in the world. It's, am I able to stream this specific video to this specific customer? Like, that's what availability means. And that notion of being able to instrument that down to the individual person level is something that is incredibly important from an observability standpoint. So it goes far beyond just, am I up or down? Am I streaming fast? It's, am I meeting my business commitments that I have to do legally in some cases?
And Mark, let me ask you this then as a follow-up to that. And this kind of combines some of the topics we've been talking about here of, okay, if you build it, will they come? And also, giving these features to the developers, when you're building out a platform, there's a certain balance that always needs to happen. And that is the need for content for newer developers, or folks that are even, let's say, new to the platform versus, expert level, if you will, right? And how do you balance the low barrier to entry and then also at the same time provide that expert level that's often, required as well?
Yeah, this is one of these delicate balances, like you mentioned before. I think about maximizing time to value. A developer's time is incredibly precious, right? And they're dealing with, their deadlines, things they have to produce, software they have to manage and run and keep operational. So they're dealing with a finite amount of time. And so that maximizing that time to value is important, because when you get the attention cycle, you want to have some very positive feedback. This is why if you look at a number of developer experiences across the industry, there's always this get me started in 20 minutes, get me success very, very quickly so I can get that initial, oh, I can do this, that aha moment that we talked about. At the same time, you want to provide a clear learning path, right? So the developer that comes in that might be new can follow a set of steps and get going. But somebody who's experienced, who might know React, might know GraphQL, can very quickly get up and going and find where they can engage to get past that. I don't need those introductory steps, but it's still a clear learning path along the way. And regardless of what you do, there shouldn't really be any surprises, right? Your tools should work the way they expect. Your CLI should work the way CLIs work. Your REST APIs should work the way REST APIs work. And so reducing that surprise factor is very, very important as well.
Yeah, no, it is sort of the great product management conundrum of do you sort of make day one super simple, or do you adapt to the power user, and then what are your trade-offs that you make in between, or do you skew one way or the other? The flip side of that is you're looking for feedback from community, you're looking for feedback from users. What are you mentioned using open interfaces, trying to be transparent about what's available, good documentation. What are some of the lessons you've learned about working with your community, taking feedback from your community to in some cases just make the experience better, and in other cases deliver things that maybe you didn't even have on your roadmap or your radar? Community is an interesting thing. What have you found in working with community that's made you more successful?
Yeah, well, I'm a little biased because you're talking with somebody who used to work for a company that did communities as their business. So I think community is fundamental to a successful developer program of any kind. And I think you have to proactively create opportunities for engagement. And that's not just the in-person engagement that everybody loves, like hackathons and meetups and things like that, but also through that community and that asynchronous engagement. And even open source and code, right? Developers love code. It's what we do. So being able to engage in all of those mediums is very, very important. And when you do engage, you have to be open to feedback, good and bad. That means you have to have confidence when you've done something that may not be the greatest. You kind of have to own your mistakes. You have to be supportive for folks that might be, the beginners that we had talked about before, who might ask that, how do I get started question? And they have to have that confidence to engage, to know they're not going to, kind of get ignored or things like that. And you really have to listen and be responsive to your community and your developers, and tune and adjust your program where you can as you go. So being open to feedback is very important. And I also, this notion of allowing people to have pride in what they do, and celebrating success, and recognizing contribution when somebody jumps in and answers a question, when they give advice, or when they open source something, being able to recognize that and reward people, even if it's that was a great job, or community badging, things like that. But recognition for contribution and participation is very important.
So Mark, that's a really good point. And we'll close out with kind of a follow-on to exactly that of what's kind of some lessons learned, right? There's a lot of best practices and recommendations in there, but we always love to talk about lessons learned, right? What are some lessons learned in your history of building developer programs?
Be deliberate is one. Know who you're going after first, and being very prescribed about how you're going to go off and target that particular developer or developer persona. So for example, when we were at Jive, we didn't really have developers on the platform. This was something very, very new. So we had a big push around developer acquisition. At New Relic, developers are a big part of our customer base. It's who uses our software. So understanding the tools that they need and providing the tools they need to be able to quickly instrument their code with our, using our SDKs, or being able to quickly get up and running and build a new Relic One application. That sort of activation phase of our existing developers is one, a key focus. So understanding and being deliberate about who you're going after is one place to start. Another place to start is you can't have, your documentation has to be good and has to be, targeted for that audience. And you can never have documentation that is, that can't be improved, right? You're always iterating on that, making sure it's up to date and current, because that's where developers encounter often, your platform, your ecosystem for the very first time is, how do I get started with this? How do I build on this? What do I do? And so your documentation is critical for success. It's kind of your welcome mat, if you will, for developers. And that's an area that, always have to pay attention to. And then I think to the point we just talked about, being able to engage, being able to have a way to deliver information to your developers and iterate and get feedback from your developers, that tight feedback loop. Think about how you're going to engage and how you're going to take that feedback and work it into your program.
Yeah. I'm going to wrap it up with that, Mark. Let me ask you real quick before we hit the road. What's the best way for folks to not only engage with the new Relic One platform, but also the community? What are some places where you're finding engagement? Maybe the best website to go to and kind of get started.
Well, you can go to developernewrelic.com, and one of the key things that we wanted to be able to do is make our platform accessible. So you can get a developer edition of New Relic. You can just sign up for it, and you have access to the platform to start building on. So developernewrelic.com is essentially the entry point there. We've got a community at discussnewrelic.com as well, and you can engage there. That's where a number of our developers are and live. It's our community. And of course, open source. We have a GitHub repository with a number of applications we've open sourced, and there's a number of things that you can use there to get you started building on New Relic.
Very cool. Very cool. We will, folks, as always, get those in the show notes. Mark, thank you so much for the time today. We really appreciate it. There will be a lot of folks who will be listening to this, and we're going to drop this right before Thanksgiving. So folks, as you're thinking about, how to better engage the developers within your organization and probably more importantly, how do you make your developers successful? Mark's given us a lot of really good things to think about, both in terms of the technology, but also kind of how to modify people's thinking and the process around making them successful. So Mark, again, thank you so much for the time today. Folks, with that, we're going to wrap it up. For myself and for Aaron, as always, we thank you so much for listening. We're thankful that you listen every week and tell a friend and rate the show on iTunes. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody if you're listening to this right when it drops. And with that, we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.